This is For My Sons, a space where we equip men to lead themselves, their families, and their communities with strength and wisdom. I'm your host, Papa O, a father, a husband, a son, and a student of life. Here, we dive into all the topics that shape the development of men. Lessons, stories, and principles you can use to strengthen your family and impact your community. If you're passionate about becoming a better man, building a better family, and leaving a better world, you're in the right place. Let's jump into today's conversation. Welcome back to the podcast. And today, we're going deeper into our roots. Not just the stories of pain and struggle, but the glory and genius that flow through your veins. History is more than chains and plantations. It is crowns, kingdoms, and creative brilliance. And today's Yoruba proverb is this: Ọ̀dọ̀ tí ò gbàgbé rẹ̀ gbé, kì í gbàgbé orísun rẹ̀, which translates as a river that forgets its source will dry up. And what that means is that if you disconnect from your origins, your strength and vitality fade. Staying connected to your history sustains you. Now, as I mentioned in that really brief intro, we are going to be talking about history. If you didn't like history in school, that's tough because we are doing it today. Okay? We're often taught that black history begins with chains, with ships, with shackles, with suffering. And that's not true. Not even close. We existed long before the ships. Before colonizers scribbled their names on our lands and our bodies. We were kings, engineers, astronomers, architects. Our story doesn't begin in bondage, it begins in brilliance. Now look to Timbuktu in Mali, home to one of the world's oldest universities, where scholars from all over the continent and beyond came to study mathematics, medicine, theology, and law. Look at Great Zimbabwe, whose stone city ruins still stand without mortar, a testament to architectural mastery. Or to the Kingdom of Benin, where the bronze casting traditions created sculptures so detailed and sophisticated, even European invaders stood in awe. Caribbean history didn't start with plantations either. The bloodlines of many of our Caribbean ancestors trace back to African warriors, artisans, and spiritual leaders. And even after they were forced across the ocean, many never stopped resisting. The Maroons of Jamaica, for example, carved out their freedom through war and negotiation, outsmarting the British and building thriving self-governing communities in the hills. History is a mirror, and if the only reflection shown to you is pain, you will start to believe that pain is all you'll come from. But if you see the whole picture, the empires, the scholars, and the builders, you begin to walk taller. You realize your story is not one of survival alone. It's one of strength, of strategy, of sovereignty. Don't let the world summarize your identity by your worst chapter. You come from legacy. Now I'm going to go through a couple of countries to give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm saying know your history. Just a bit. Now if you want to read deeper into it, there is such thing as the internet, as I'm sure you're listening to this through. So, look it up yourself. But for now, I will just give you little tidbits, right? Starting with Nigeria, my homeland. The Yoruba people created a civilization so rich in beauty and intellect that it still humbles historians today. The fair bronze heads are not just art, they are evidence. Evidence that African lands without European influence crafted sculptures with proportions, symmetry, and realism that rival the Renaissance. These were not primitive people. These were master metallurgists, artisans, and storytellers immortalizing kings and deities in brass. Now let's fly over to Ethiopia. A land untouched by colonization's full grip, the Aksum Empire stood as a beacon of innovation and sovereignty for over 800 years. It minted its own coins, maintained an international trade network, and became one of the earliest nations to embrace Christianity. Its people built Lalibella's rock-hewn churches, carved directly from mountain stone, no modern machinery, just brilliance and belief. South Africa. The Zulu nation, led by visionaries like Shaka Zulu, reorganized military strategy with deadly precision. Their innovations in battle and diplomacy reshaped the region, and their resistance to colonization inspired many long after. Kenya and Tanzania. Along the Swahili coast, trade flourished for over 1,000 years. African merchants, fluent in Arabic, Farsi, and local languages, built a culture rooted in commerce, faith, and global connection. These city-states, like Kilwa and Mombasa, weren't isolated. They were cosmopolitan, learned, and respected. See, Africa is not a continent of former slaves. It is a cradle of civilization, a forge of intellect, a heartbeat of empire. Before chains, there was craftsmanship, command, and culture, and they were all still in our blood today. And now we fly over to the Caribbean. Jamaica was never an island of plantations. It was a stronghold of freedom. The Maroons, descendants of Africans who escaped slavery, didn't just hide in the mountains. They organized, resisted, and negotiated with the British on their own terms. They built schools, governed their people, and signed treaties from a position of strength, not submission. Haiti stands as one of the greatest examples of black resistance in human history. The Haitian Revolution wasn't just a rebellion, it was a war of strategy and endurance that toppled Napoleon's army, declared the first black-led republic, and forced the world to take notice. Haiti shattered the myth of European invincibility and rewrote the rules of global politics forever. And across the region, there are sparks in the same fire. In Barbados, Bus's rebellion in 1816 pushed the island closer to emancipation. In Grenada, the Fedon Rebellion of 1795 saw freed men and slaves rise against British rule, demanding justice. And in Suriname, the Saramacca Maroons resisted for decades, eventually winning autonomy through relentless warfare and negotiation. These aren't stories of passive survival. These are stories of strategy, courage, and self-determination. Reminders that the Caribbean has always been more than beaches and sugarcane. It's been a battleground of brilliance and backbone. And now we fly back over to Africa, to the country of Liberia. Liberia is a nation born from the ashes of captivity, but it was never a story of return, it was a story of vision. In the early 19th century, freed black Americans made the courageous decision to sail across the Atlantic, not to run from the pain of the Americas, but to build something of their own on African soil. They arrived in what would become Liberia, named its capital Monrovia, in honor of the US President James Monroe, yet determined to write their own history, independent of American control or European domination. Liberia became a powerful symbol, a black republic, run by black people for black people, decades before other African nations could even dream of such sovereignty. It established its own constitution, raised its own flag, and built institutions guided by faith, resilience, and a deep desire to prove that black self-rule was not only possible, but preferable. It wasn't perfect, no nation is. Liberia faced conflict, cultural tension between settlers and indigenous groups, and growing pains, but its foundation remains a bold declaration. We will govern ourselves. We will shape our own destiny. Liberia reminds us that freedom is not given, it is built, and it must be maintained with both courage and wisdom. Across every continent, black brilliance has left its fingerprints. Not confined to one region or chapter in history, we are a global force, building, shaping, inventing, healing, teaching, and leading. In Brazil, where the largest black population outside of Africa resides, the legacy of resistance and cultural fusion lives in capoeira, in candomblé, in the rhythms of samba, and in the modern brilliance of Afro-Brazilian scholars and artists reclaiming space in politics, education, and media. In France, the likes of Aimé Césaire and Frantz Fanon redefined anti-colonial thought and gave intellectual frameworks for liberation movements across Africa and the Caribbean. Black French citizens continue to make their mark, not just in arts, but in academia, law, and science. In the United States, Black Americans have turned pain into poetry, struggle into strength. From George Washington Carver in agriculture to Dr. Charles Drew in medicine to contemporary thought leaders like Dr. Cornel West and Bryan Stevenson, the contribution is unrelenting. Not to mention inventors, mathematicians, astronauts, and business titans who move history with quiet consistency. In the UK, the Windrush generation and their descendants continue to challenge systemic barriers while shaping culture, governance, and industry. From Chinua Achebe to Nera Chamberlain, Black Brits are influencing literature, mathematics, policy, and beyond. We gave the world jazz, hip-hop, Afro beats, but also new surgical techniques like those advanced by Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, one of the first surgeons to successfully perform open heart surgery in the US. New blueprints for business pioneered by men like Damon John, who built FUBU into a fashion empire and now mentors entrepreneurs globally. Ethics and law shaped by thinkers like Bryan Stevenson, who work with the Equal Justice Initiative, have changed legal precedent and exposed injustice in the American system. And education carried forward by leaders like Dr. John Henrik Clarke, who established African-centered historical scholarship and demanded our place in global academia. Even when unacknowledged, we have always been contributors, not just consumers. Not just players on the field, but architects of the stadium, quite literally, in the case of Paul R. Williams, who designed world-famous buildings, luxury hotels, and even homes for Hollywood's elite, all while navigating a profession that tried to keep men like him out. You want some of those name of buildings? No problem, I've got some for you. Right? Buildings like the futuristic Flying Saucer at the Los Angeles International Airport and the Crescent Wing of the Beverly Hills Hotel, both designed by him. Okay? Black excellence isn't rare. It's just rarely recognized. But we are everywhere, and we are not waiting for permission to shine. So I've spent the most part of this podcast episode talking about, different countries' histories. And here is why I want to tell you why this history matters. When you know your history, you become dangerous because you can no longer be easily lied to and manipulated. You stop accepting the world's watered down version of your worth. You no longer shrink when others try to define you by your lowest moments because you understand the full weight of where you come from. History is not just a list of dates and dead men and their affairs and escapades or sexual escapades or anything like that. No. It's your spiritual ancestry. It's the fire in your chest when you walk into a room and know, without needing anyone's validation, that you belong there. When you know your history, you see through the noise. You realize that being black has never been a curse. It's been a badge. Not of ease, but of endurance, excellence, and elevation. You see that your people have always adapted, always contributed, always led, even when no one gave them credit. Your history is filled with kings who governed empires with wisdom, scholars who decoded the stars, architects who carved wonders from stone, inventors who created what the world still uses, and warriors who defended freedom with blood and bone. And the truth? It fuels you. It reminds you that you don't need to become something. You already are something. You are the continuation of greatness. History gives you a foundation to build your future. It gives you context for your pain and clarity for your purpose. It reminds you that you are not a disconnected soul trying to find yourself. You are part of a royal lineage that's still writing its story. When you know who you are and you know where you come from, you start walking differently. You start building differently. You don't settle. You don't beg. You build boldly, beautifully, and with both eyes on legacy. Look, history shouldn't live only in textbooks, right? Cook your traditional meals. Listen to ancestral music. Wear your native clothes with dignity. Share these with your children so they never have to rediscover their identity in adulthood. Right? Now, as always, I've got some practical tips, steps, advice, suggestions, whatever you want to call it. Right? So when it comes to action, pick one country. And I'd probably suggest to pick the one that's best close to your heart, right, as a start. Now, for me, I would obviously pick Nigeria, right? Could be the same for you, could be different for you, right? So pick one country or figure you've heard about today and research them deeply this week, right? And for those of you that write a journal, here's a couple of prompts for you. What part of your history are you most proud of? How can you embody that pride every day? Yeah? And I even have a challenge for you this week. I guess I call it a community challenge, if anything. Right? Host a dinner or storytelling evening. Right? Share the stories that textbooks ignore, even if that community is your family in your home. Okay? Because we here on this podcast, we want to build a good community around us. Right? And the community starts at home. Just I think the saying goes, what? Charity begins at home. Right? Build from your home, work outwards. But even if you already have children, you can just say, one night, build a bit of excitement around it as well. Be like, hey, when you get back from school, I've got some stories to tell you. Right? Now, of course, that will sound that will sound ominous at first, but spending time with your children, especially as we in the podcast were promoting, about active fatherhood, I'm sure your children will be chomping at the bit to hear from you. Why? Because you'll be sitting down and giving them your full attention. Okay? So here are my closing thoughts. You are not just someone trying to make it through life. You are the continuation of a legacy that began in greatness. Your forefathers and their forefathers, and even before that, were thinkers, builders, teachers, farmers, warriors, healers, and visionaries. They cultivated land, governed communities, mastered disguise, and passed on wisdom through story, rhythm, and ritual. Their greatness didn't begin in struggle, it began in purpose. You are not starting from nothing. You are standing on something, on shoulders wide enough to carry kingdoms. So don't shrink, don't wait for permission, don't apologize for your brilliance. Let the memory of who they were give feel to who you're becoming. Let their dreams echo in your decisions. Let their unfinished work continue through your hands. You were born to build something beautiful. You were born to lead, to shape, to elevate. And you have everything within you to do exactly that. Until next time. Thank you for joining me today on For My Sons. I hope today's message challenged you, encouraged you, or gave you something worth passing down. If you found value in this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a new letter, a new lesson, or a new legacy moment. Until next time, be a communications CEO. Communicate clearly, communicate early, and communicate often. This is Papa O, and I am out.